Hello, thanks for joining us. One of today's guests has written an epic novel described as India's answer to The Godfather. The other wrote one of the most talked about debuts of the moment, which manages to say all there is to say about Britain today. I'm delighted to welcome Natasha Brown, author of Assembly. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. And Deepti Kapoor, who's here to talk about Age of Vice. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, both of you are here in France as your books are coming out in French. What does that mean to you as a writer, Natasha?
It's just surreal to come to Paris and sort of live a bit of a Parisian dream for a few days and see my book sort of take on a new life and reach new readers in this sort of new French form. It's been surreal but really lovely.
Yeah, same. I love French films, French books. My first novel was actually influenced a little by Duras. So, it's just to have this kind of excitement and interest from the French just always fills me with great joy.
Now, your book, Age of Vice, starts with a crash. A rich man's car in New Delhi ploughs into 5 people who live and sleep on the street. The man at the wheel is AJ, and his story is at the heart of the book. Tell us more about the story.
So, as you said, it starts with a car crash in the very early hours of New Delhi morning at the start of the millennium. And 5 people die, and then we go back in time, we jump back to delve into the lives of 3 characters who are involved in the crash. There's Ajay, who's this loyal servant with a tragic past, and Sunny, who's the only son and heir to a big business fortune, which was also and he wants to move away from his father's criminality. And Neda, this young and naive and curious journalist who gets entangled in their world. And as the novel progresses, we basically see how every character's dreams and ambitions take them to a point of no return.
And Deepti, you were born in Uttar Pradesh. You grew up in Mumbai, Bahrain and Dehradun. And the story is set, as you say, within this powerful Wadia family. Why did you decide to tell the story through the lens of this rich family? Is it a milieu that you know?
Yes, actually, I spent my 20s in Delhi. I was a journalist, but, that was my day job. And at night, I partied quite extensively with some extremely wealthy people who partied really hard. And they had now that I think of it, a very excessive lifestyle. This was also the time when India had just come out of sort of a socialist economy. This was post-liberalization, reforms had happened. Suddenly you saw wealth being created overnight. So there were people who were basically rich who suddenly became super rich. And that's what I wanted to study. I wanted to examine the social implications of what happened. So starting or working with a big family, with a big empire was great because I could have a cast of characters. I realized that it's actually not a novel about the rich. It's a novel about inequality and corruption and power. And that's only when I started writing it, that's when all of these themes came together.
And it is an epic story with nearly 600 pages. Natasha, your book, Assembly, is a concise 100 or so pages long about the grind of everyday prejudice. It's told from the perspective of a successful woman of colour in London who works for a finance firm. Tell us more.
Well, yes, it starts with her. She works in the city in finance, and it spans just a couple of late summer days in 2019. And we journey with this woman from the city out to attend sort of a grand garden party in the English countryside.
How much of it is your own story? Because I know you worked in finance in the city for a while.
Very little in a way, and I think partially because the specifics of this woman we don't really learn. We don't know how old she is, we don't know her name, we don't know too much about her. I really wanted to start with this framing and the interesting thing that these new industries, I suppose, we have in our economy, finance, technology, they enable sort of a kind of social mobility that perhaps wasn't possible 50 years ago. And for me, it was an opportunity to say, well, what does a typical Jane Austen novel that had someone, say, from the merchant class in London travel to the countryside and rub up with the gentry? how does that look today? What does that story look like? So yes, I drew from, I suppose, the broad circumstances of my life, but I really felt I was embracing sort of a well-worn story type.
No encounter or relationship, no success or failure seems untainted by assumptions based on the colour of the main character's skin. It's been described as a scorching portrait of the British class system and its poisonous relationship with race, immigration, work and sexual politics. What are you saying about Britain and maybe the world today?
You know, I think we're in this really interesting moment of flux. Globalization and these new industries, as I've mentioned, have created movement of people. And I think the classic relationship between race and class, from when race was sort of explicitly created a few hundred years ago, is being undermined almost by this shift. And I think certainly in the UK, we're having a huge national conversation about what identity means in this shifting global environment. And for me, coming at this as a writer, it seemed like a really interesting opportunity to actually pull out a few people and say, how does it feel for them on the individual level? How does it, I suppose, affect how they think of themselves, but also how they get along with one another?
And Deepti, both of your books tackle class systems. Do you think it's possible to separate questions of race from questions of class?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think India, yes. I mean, it's a very specific place where you have questions of class which intersect with questions of caste, much more than race. And within, if you speak about race, you can speak about skin color, because India does have a big problem with the idea of fair skin being a marker of money, fame, success, all of that. But there's class and caste that really has to be sort of examined in India currently. I mean, always, but specifically at this particular moment. And as Natasha was saying, what happened when we, last 20 years, the economy was supercharged with capitalism. So I was interested in seeing the social mobility that can bring to people, because you do have middle classes being created. You do have people being able to overcome, say, traditional caste identities and become someone else. But it's also very difficult, which is why there is a character like Ajay in Age of Vice, where he is, try as he might, he'll never be able to lose the baggage of who he is.
Now, both of your books have very particular settings and the geographical and political landscapes of India. And the middle-class London life, British aristocratic country life. In what ways are they both also global stories, would you say?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. I think certainly the way I think about it with this novel is Britain is an island that has really had outsized importance in the world, at least historically, but with sort of power spreading out a bit more across the world and corporations increasingly being multinational, and perhaps a lessening of British relevance in some senses. I think that's the undercurrent of a lot of what the characters are questioning, and it facilitates social mobility, exactly as you mentioned, Deepti. But it also challenges some of the characters, the wealthier, sort of more traditional upper-class British characters. They're fairly large landowners in the UK, but that no longer guarantees wealth. And you can no longer definitely derive income from holding land in the UK. That's a fundamental shift, I think, in how wealth has been understood in the UK. And of course it has social consequences and makes for interesting novel fodder, I think.
And Deepti, I read your book, I think, is being translated into 16 languages, and there's interest in making it into a TV series, so there's definitely global interest in the story. And what can you tell us about? Are we going to see it on TV soon?
Well, I don't know how soon, but I'm adapting it with my husband for FX. And, that was great because it was an early endorsement in the storytelling, I think. And also the fact that America and Hollywood was interested in a story that was basically just set in India with Indian characters. They're not Indian American, they're just Indian. I thought that was, really interesting because it does that, it's not just, the success of Squid Game, for example, shows that people are interested in global stories and the themes are common corruption, of crony capitalism, of what happens when people lose trust in the democratic process because of corruption. I think all of these themes are universal now.
Okay, sadly we're out of time. There's so much to talk about. We always end our show with our guests' cultural pick of the moment. Dipti, what have you chosen?
Okay, so because it has to be very recent, I chose Andor, which is this. Well, it's a show. It's a Star Wars show, but it's for people who don't actually like Star Wars.
Right.
It's like me. Ostensibly, it's about the making of a rebel leader, but really, it's a really interesting examination of how totalitarian regimes survive and thrive, and within the structure of a popular science fiction franchise. So
Okay, well,
it's really great.
So I'll look it up. Natasha, you've chosen an exhibition at the Tate Britain. Tell us more about that.
Yes, so a British award-winning painter, Lynette Yadom-Boakye, is having a solo exhibition at the Tate at the Tate at the moment. And I'm not someone who has at all a sophisticated understanding of art, but every time I look at her paintings, I just feel arrested by them. And there's a real timeless and imaginative quality to them, I think, but they also, to me, feel very real and very grounded in truth. So it's one of those, I think, artists who just manages, for me at least, to convey something truly meaningful. And there's videos I think the Tate has done, so you can see the exhibition even if you can't make it in person.
Well, we're actually going to play out with images from the exhibition so people can have a taster of it. We'll leave you with a look at that. Natasha Brown's Assembly and Deepti Kapoor's Age of Vice are out now. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. See you next time.